I don't think I can keep pretending I don't like you anymore.
So here's the thing. I, like the better part of the entire world, have been completely and utterly consumed by the new TV series Heated Rivalry. It's sexy, it's emotional, it's well acted, it's perfectly casted, it's just amazing. And since I can't control my urges, even if I'm a little slow posting since the finale, I've decided to make this video to talk about all of my thoughts. We'll go over the book series in brief, a complete recap / summary of the TV series, my thoughts throughout, and of course, also some discussion throughout about the ups and downs of this series. Consider it the most comprehensive review of this series that I am physically capable of. See, I'm not just a Teen Wolf channel. I contain multitudes. I'm not kidding when I say that this show is probably the best thing to come out of 2025. You can quote me on that and use it to promote the show if you want. I will admit that my thoughts on this show are kind of manic and they jump around a bit, but I've tried my best to organize it into sections, so you can use the chapters of this video to skip ahead if you don't care about the books and just want the show, for example. Unlike Shane Hollander, I am very versatile. Before I jump into the series itself, I want to talk a little about the books. There's no plot spoilers, so if you haven't gotten around to reading them or you want to avoid spoilers for the latest seasons of the show, then you'll be fine. Basically, the books are fine. I have a lot of respect for Rachel Reed, and I'm low-key campaigning to play Harris in the upcoming season, and if you knew what I look like, you'd probably be okay with that, but the real point here is that the books are good. They're not perfect, and I don't think anything can really be perfect, but they're really not that bad. I've seen so much contrarian coverage about how the series and the books are bad, actually, and I don't think that's true. Some of the books are better than others. Some of the characters are written better than others, but all 6 of them are perfectly fine. It's generally my opinion that none of the books in this series are peak literature, and it's not like they're trying to be the most poignant or symbolic writing ever, but it's written well enough and has enough character for the most part that you can still feel for them and enjoy what's happening. I know there were plenty of moments when I was kicking my feet, and at least one when I had to leave the house and was genuinely mad that I couldn't just keep reading. Each book follows a different primary couple for the most part, and since it's a connected universe, it builds off the previous books and has appearances from characters throughout. If you've only seen the trailers for the show, you might think the entire thing is about Shane and Ilya, and that's not necessarily true. Jumping back to the first book, Game Changer is all about Scott Hunter and Kip. For those of you who have seen the show, this is episode 3, and it finishes up in episode 5 and a bit in episode 6. Crazy how they manage, but they pretty much tell the entire book storyline in 1 and a bit episodes. I like Scott, and I like Kip, and I like this book. It follows Scott Hunter, a professional hockey player who is going through a slump, and Kip, who works at a smoothie bar. I'll keep the discussion of the plot to a minimum, but if you're going to read this series, you really better start at the beginning for the full effect. The second book, Heated Rivalry, is where a majority of the show comes from. I mean, it's right there on the tin. This one follows Shane Hollander and Ilya Rozanov, who are both professional hockey players and play for rival teams. They have a rivalry on the ice and an intense fuck buddies relationship off the ice. The book is pretty good too, even though it jumps ahead months at a time because Shane and Ilya only really see each other every so often when their teams play against each other. We'll come back to that later. The first season ends at the end of this book, and the rest of the series is all presumably going to be touched on in a future season, which I believe has been stated to be expected sometime in 2027. The third book, Tough Guy, follows Ryan Price, who is a big hockey player, and Fabian, who is a much smaller musician with a bit of a chip on his shoulder about hockey players. If you've only watched the show, they reference Ryan in a conversation in the 4th episode, but otherwise there's no part of this story included in the first season. I liked this one less than the second book, but I think I had a real attachment to Shane and Ilya at this point, so when I was reading these marathon styles, I had trouble letting go of that one before this. Both Shane and Ilya do appear in this book, though only very minor roles. They're both in the 4th book too, titled Common Goal, which is about Kyle, who is one of Kip's friends from the first book, and Eric Bennett, who is a professional hockey goalie. We meet Kyle in the 3rd episode of the show, but as far as I can tell, we haven't seen Eric yet. He's older and exploring a side of his sexuality that he had not considered within his straight marriage. I like this one the least in the series, which I think is a popular opinion, but I still think it's worth a read. The 5th book, Role Model, follows professional hockey player Troy and the social media manager for his team, Harris. This is where my bias is strongest since, as I said, I am low-key campaigning for a chance to audition for Harris. I don't even know if you can call it acting since we're both from the Ottawa area. We look pretty much the same and we have jobs in social media marketing. Crave or Bell or whoever, if you happen to be watching this and looking for copyright infringement, hit me up. Both Shane and Ilya are in this one too, for reasons that will become clear in my spoiler section later, and it's a lot of fun. This one also takes the longest before it jumps into the spicy stuff, so if you're more here for sexual tension, then you'll appreciate this a lot. And if you're like me and live in the Ottawa area, you'll get a kick out of all the location references. The last book in the series so far, The Long Game, is where the second season of the show will get most of its Shane and Ilya content. This one is about them again, and similar to the way that Heated Rivalry takes place, alongside Game Changer, there are parts of this book that happened simultaneously with events from the previous books. Without a doubt, we'll be seeing that overlap in the future episodes. As you'll see throughout this video, Shane is my favorite, and Ilya also has my heart, so the events of this one are a real treat. It's always great seeing more of them, and it's probably the most plot-heavy book in the series. It helps that it's the second go-around for Shane and Ilya, and we get to see a lot more of them that we didn't in their first book. As of now, Rachel Reed has not said no to writing more of Shane and Ilya's story, but there aren't any concrete plans, so that's the entire series for now. She has 2 more queer hockey romance novels that take place outside of the Game Changer universe, which I plan to check out soon, but it's just these 6 books relevant for today's discussion. As far as the thoughts on the books, I feel like I've been pretty clear. They're all enjoyable, and if you're into spicy romance, then all of these have plenty for you to enjoy, but if you're not here for the spice, then there is still some romance and plot to keep you interested. I'm sort of neutral in the spice aspect in general, and I don't choose my books based on spice, but what's in there is pretty well written and very much not repetitive, so there's that. Twins Reading Books on Instagram posted this infographic that lays out which chapters of the book are spicy, and as you can see, there are quite a few. Crazy that there's so many in that last book since this one has the most engaging plot, but I digress. I guess one other thing I can bring up about the books is that this is absolutely the opportunity to print an adaptation tie-in cover. You could easily get one for the first 2 books so far and then print the rest of the series as the second season comes out, but that's just that marketing brain of mine talking. Fans are begging for them, and it appears that the books themselves have been largely sold out since the show started. It looks like the publishing companies completely underestimated the demand that this show would have and ran out before the premiere even aired, which is kind of indicative of what was to come as far as the hype for the show is concerned. And as far as the show is concerned, I've got to say, this show is genuinely amazing. It's kind of amazing that a show filled with relatively unknown actors and built on a pretty minimal budget has resonated as much as this one has. When I say it's the best show of 2025, I really mean that for what it is. It is a series that has everything stacked against it, in a sense, and it pulled off some of the most impactful TV I've personally ever seen. There's really no other way to say it. As a Canadian, I also feel like I need to mention the fact that a lot of Canadian TV has a reputation for being not very good. There are rules for Canadian TV stations about how much programming must be Canadian-made, same with the radio, and a lot of the time there is an attitude about these shows being poorly made, underdeveloped, or all around just bad. And I am absolutely thrilled that this show is not one of those cases. You can probably argue that a lot of that sentiment is not accurate, and there are lots of great Canadian-made TV series, but even if you have that mindset, there is no way you can look at Heated Rivalry and say it's anything but extraordinary. It's kind of a perfect storm of goodness as far as I'm concerned. My whole thing is kind of summary recaps and discussion, so we will be going into that in a moment, but I wanted to give you some background on the lovely people you will see on your screen in a moment, as well as some of the people behind the scenes. First of all, as I said, this show is so proudly Canadian that it's actually making me happy. It's a level of national pride I haven't felt since, like, the 2010 Olympics. The author of the books, Rachel Reed, is Canadian, and she's from Nova Scotia. Shout out to one of the Canadian provinces that is so easily overlooked. Next, the writer, director, creator of the show, Jacob Tierney, is also Canadian, and he's from Montreal. As far as I'm concerned, Jacob is one of the best things that could have happened to this series, since he's pretty much perfect from an outsider's perspective. First of all, he's an openly gay creator, which is a big deal when it comes to the production of a series as unquestionably queer as this one, and he has a history of working on hockey-adjacent quality TV. If you've ever heard of Letterkenny, which is another amazing Canadian TV series, he's one of the co-writers, co-creators, and creatives around that. Like how this show is a perfect storm of goodness, Jacob Tierney was the perfect combination to helm this show. There are some confusion about the origins of this show, but fear not, I can explain. It's licensed as a Crave original series, which for those of you who are unfamiliar is a Canadian streaming service, and I'm pretty sure it's also the only fully Canadian streaming service that's in English. They don't have very many originals, and it's a subsidiary of the megacorp Bell, which basically owns the phone and satellite TV market in a lot of Canada, so from what I understand, it is a very well-funded app. Crave is the platform that carries HBO shows in Canada since we don't have HBO Max, which leads into the fact that HBO is the distributor for Heated Rivalry in the US and in most other places. Some people mistakenly believe that Heated Rivalry is an HBO show, which is not true. HBO just distributes it in the US and some other territories, while Crave is the main creator, so the show is 100% Canadian driven. Oh, Canada. The exact numbers are unclear, but it appears that most of the first season's funding comes from Canadian government grants and tax credits, which is typical for Canadian TV, as well as money from Jacob Tierney's production company, Accent Aigu Entertainment. While it's a Crave original, I believe that Accent Aigu Entertainment owns the show completely. You can tell right off the bat that the production team cares deeply about the show in all aspects, and it really shows in the final product. From the cast, we have a slew of Canadian talent as well, with Hudson Williams, who plays Shane, Francois Arnault, who plays Scott Hunter, Robbie G.K., who plays Kip, Callan Potter, who plays Hayden Pike, Franco Lopresti, who plays Cliff Marlowe, Camilla Cowell, who plays Jackie Pike, Colton Stewart, who plays Carter Vaughn, Caden Connors, who plays Sasha, Nadine Baba, who plays Elena, Sophia Nellis, who plays Rose, real-life hockey player Harrison Brown as one of the Boston players named Connors, as well as Benjamin Roy, who plays JJ Dagenet, and Bianca Nugara, who plays Maria, if I'm not mistaken. Really, it's an entire cast of Canucks, and it's so great to see them all being recognized for their talent all around the world. As far as main couples go, I feel like they jump right off the page. I mentioned before that we see Kyle from Common Goal briefly, and Matthew Finlan, who is also Canadian, plays him well for what we see of him. He looks pretty much exactly how I pictured from the books, so I'm looking forward to see how he approached his upcoming plotlines. I don't see Ryan, Fabian, Eric, Troy, or Harris in person at all the first season, other than maybe this shot of a player whose last name is Bennett, but they don't seem to be a goalie, so maybe it's just an Easter egg. But Shane and Ilya? Oh my god, they are actually perfect. Hudson Williams plays Shane Hollander, and he is so perfect. I will go on and on about this as we go through the later sections, but his facial acting is some of the best I've ever seen. Sometimes you run into an issue when adapting books because you don't get the internal monologue telling you what they're thinking, but with Hudson's acting you can actually see the thoughts as they go through his brain. He plays Shane so perfectly that I doubt anyone who's seen an episode is able to separate the two from their brain at all. Plus, if you thought I was done going on about the Canadian aspect of the show, he is also Canadian, from Kamloops in BC, which just so happens to be where my extended family lives, so I can't help but feel some kind of connection to the guy. All of the behind-the-scenes content I've seen proves that he is so opposite to Shane's personality, but he does such a good job bringing him to the screen. Plus, who can forget the iconic Hudson Williams arch scene? And of course, there's Connor Story as Ilya Rozanov. If you thought that Hudson disappeared into his character, then this is another level. You can actually see the difference between when Connor is playing Ilya and when he's being himself. His face shape literally changes. He does such a great job with the accent, he does such a good job with the little character moments. He's just so good. I'm a Shane fan through and through, and he had me wavering onto Team Ilya. Unfortunately, I can't claim him for Canada, but I guess I can let Texas take this win for now. There really isn't anything I can say about these two that hasn't been said before, but the chemistry and acting performances from both of them absolutely makes this show. Don't get me wrong, the plot and the writing are great, but when these two are looking at each other, I actually believe in romance. Not to be dramatic, but I literally revived my old hobby of painting just so I could get a version of this face on my wall. I'm completely consumed. This feels like a perfect opportunity to jump in and go over everything that we see in the first season of Heated Rivalry. Unlike my usual videos, I'm not going to recap every single moment because I do think that every single person watching this video should go and watch the show. Assuming you don't mind seeing gay people having lots of sex, which I'm sure you don't if you've come this far. Seriously, get Crave, get HBO Max, get the channel on Prime, or whatever you need to do in order to watch this for yourself. It's just 6 episodes, and I promise you'll find yourself going back and watching them again. I know I have been. This recap session is not a replacement for watching the show, but from this point on, if you're still watching, I'm going to assume that you have seen it, so beware of spoilers. You've been warned. The first episode of Heated Rivalry, simply called Rookies, opens in 2008, with rookie Shane Hollander approaching rookie Ilya Rozanov outside of the International Prospect Cup, which is the in-show version of the World Junior Championships. Neither of them are in the big leagues yet, but they are both very talented and very popular in the upcoming draft. Shane approaches quite friendly, and Ilya is much more standoffish, which seems to be the start of the rivalry that will drive the media moving forward. The Canadian team loses, and Ilya is smug about it, which definitely kickstarts Shane's mixed feelings. I mean, just look at his face here. We jump ahead 6 months, and it's right after the draft. Shane has been drafted as the number 2 pick and to the Montreal Metros, and Ilya was the number 1 pick to the Boston Raiders. Montreal and Boston, like in real life, have a pretty strong rivalry, so the two are surely going to be pitted against each other. This is also where we get the first inkling that both Shane and Ilya are moving forward with very high expectations on their shoulders. Ilya from his father, who expects him to represent Russia, and his team, who expects greatness, and Shane from his parents and the head of his team, who are touting him as a symbol of Asian representation in the sport. Shane goes to the hotel gym and runs into Ilya there. They immediately start competing silently on the spin bikes and then have a full conversation full of eye-fucking and suggestive looks while they cool off. The seeds are planted in both of their minds. We jump ahead another 6 months, so we're in early 2009 now at the next year's International Prospect Cup, and this time Canada takes home the win. Ilya gets a call from his shitty brother Alexei, and we the audience get a clear look at how little Ilya actually likes dealing with his family. Another 6 months later, both Shane and Ilya are working on a commercial, and Ilya teases Shane with comments about him being pretty. Meanwhile, I'm here smirking and kicking my feet. In the showers after the shoot, Ilya flirts with Shane some more, and while he's into it, Shane refuses to do anything because they're in public. A little later, Shane invites Ilya up to his hotel room, and he waits in the dark in a full suit while he mentally prepares for what he's just gotten himself into. In a fun moment, Ilya runs into Shane's mom in the elevator. If only she knew how significant he'll be moving forward. In Shane's room, they hook up, and then Ilya leaves. One night stand complete. Or so they think. They continue their rivalry both on the ice where they face off for the puck and off the ice when they hate-watch media coverage about each other. 4 months later, they're both at the All-Star game, on opposite teams of course, and Shane helps Ilya out at a press conference. Ilya breaks the shot accuracy record previously held by Scott Hunter, and then Shane immediately breaks that record too. As Ilya is skating off, he kind of discreetly tells Shane his room number. We also meet Scott Hunter here since he's on the same All-Stars team as Shane, and the two seem like buddies even if they're not super close. Shane goes to Ilya's hotel room, which is right next to Scott Hunter's room, and they hook up again. When Shane is leaving, Ilya takes his phone and they add each other under secret names. Ilya is Lily in Shane's phone, and Shane is Jane in Ilya's phone. Perfect aliases, guys. Nice job. 2 weeks later, they're supposed to be able to meet up and sleep together again, but there's troubles with the flight, so Shane goes to dinner with some teammates, including his team bestie Hayden Pike, and Ilya gets surprised by his childhood bestie Svetlana showing up at his apartment. We jump ahead another 4 months to the Major League Hockey Awards, and Shane wins the award for Rookie of the Year. He celebrates a bit and then runs into Ilya on the roof. They have a bit of a drunken argument, and even though they make out a bit, they are still clearly in their heads about the whole situationship. All in all, a really solid premiere for the season, but it didn't air as the premiere alone, so we'll reserve our judgment on that for now. The time jumps can be a little jarring at first, but since the whole essence of these two's relationship is the fact they only really get to see each other whenever they're in the same town for a game or an event, that's the big takeaway here. However, even when they're not physically near each other, they are both already consumed by thoughts of the other, since they're constantly watching news coverage or being reminded about how much the other person is an obstacle for them to become the best in the sport. It's a great setup for recurring tension and a tight 48-minute episode. For each episode, I've decided I'm going to choose a favorite scene, so then when we're done with the video, we'll have a nice highlight reel we can look back on when we don't have the full 6 hours to rewatch the whole thing. My favorite scene in this episode is tough between Shane literally sitting in the dark and semi-panicking about what he's just gotten himself into, and the whole commercial that they're shooting when Ilya calls Shane pretty. But I think I've got to go with the commercial scene. Ilya being obsessed with Shane's freckles is a big thing, and this is one of the first times we can get a sense of that, so it's a great moment. Plus, it's nice seeing both of them laugh and goof off a bit since they don't really do that together in these early years very much. As for moments to analyze in this first episode, I think that there's a few. Like I mentioned when it came up, it's clear that both Shane and Ilya are grappling with some kind of legacy that is pressuring them to be as good as they can be. Ilya gets it from his dad and occasionally in phone calls from his brother, and Shane gets it from his parents who are obsessed with hockey and also what seems to be the entire Asian community. They both feel the need to be the best, and since they're both once-in-a-generation talents, it means that the rivalry they have can only really be between the two of them. They don't consider any other players on the opposing teams to be a threat at all, only each other, and that heated rivalry, is exactly what drives them for the first few years of knowing each other. The sexual chemistry is an added layer since at this point there is still a kind of dominance that they're clearly fighting for in their dynamic. Ilya is clearly more experienced, and this is a source of anxiety and occasionally frustration for Shane, who we can tell from conversations they have is a little more withdrawn about these things. But at the same time, you can tell that Ilya is drawn immediately to Shane. Of the two, at this point, it seems like Shane is starting to equate Ilya's presence with his own self-discovery, even going out and buying toys to simulate the kind of things the two of them do together, while Ilya views Shane more as an all-consuming presence that gives him everything he wants in the moment: electric chemistry, physical intimacy, and a bit of competition. People like to point out the idea that Ilya fell first and Shane fell harder, but I think that this point in the show, it definitely comes across more that Shane has a bit more investment in their relationship. It's tough though, since they both have things that I would point to them being more attached. Shane is using the hookups as a mean of discovering himself, and quite possibly linking the idea of Ilya with his own identity in the process, which makes him more invested in the relationship. But Ilya is the one who's often reaching out and offering room numbers to meet up at, a phone number exchange with secret names to keep the flirty communication going, and, as we see in the aforementioned commercial scene, he's also the one who suggested that Shane and he do the commercial together at all. I don't know, I know I'm digging way further into this than I need to, but I really appreciate how layered this story is when you sit down and think about it. The show in general kind of has an air of being just a smutty gay hockey show, but the acting and the production lend itself to looking a little deeper and interpreting things if you pay attention. I love it's not the kind of show you can't just have on in the background while you look at your phone. You do actually have to engage with what is happening on screen if you want the best experience. Alrighty, moving on to the second half of the premiere. The second episode, titled Olympians, opens up the summer of 2011. So if we're following the timeline, it's been about 3 years since they met as rookies and about a year and a half since they first slept together in the summer of 2009. Ilya is back in Russia for the summer, like he does every year, and Shane is still in Montreal. Even though they're halfway across the planet from each other, they're still flirting and chirping each other over text. In the fall of 2011, Montreal beats Boston and they continue flirting. We jump to winter and then spring of 2012 and more flirting. In the spring of 2012, Ilya even gets so bold as to send a dick pic while Shane is in his hotel room with his buddy Hayden, which is a fun moment. Winter 2013 rolls around and then spring 2013, and of course, more flirting over text. It's not super clear if they actually meet up and sleep together in this montage, but I'm pretty sure they do. The timeline is a little different than it is in the books, but pretty much every chance they get, they meet up to sleep together. Though at this point, it's never actually at each other's houses. They're keeping it casual as they can and sticking only to hotel rooms. Shane invites Ilya to an actual address though, and this begins the saga of hookups that take place at Shane's new apartment complex. He's in the process of buying out the whole building, but he has a swanky apartment that the two can use whenever they're in Montreal. Ilya shows up and gets the grand tour, but they quickly decide they'd rather use their time to sleep together. Seeing as they only do this every few months, it seems like a wise choice. This is also notable because it's the first time they actually go all the way. Nice of them to wait until they're using an actual apartment rather than just a hotel room. As Ilya is leaving, we get one of the most recognizable moments from the show. In the stairwell, they flirt a bunch and Shane holds onto Ilya's jacket. They have a very tender kiss and talk about the upcoming Olympics. Shane is playing for Team Canada, of course, and Ilya will be there for Team Russia. Just as Ilya leaves, we get this look of total tenderness from Shane that definitely betrays the feelings he doesn't know he has. It's iconic, and rightfully so. Get you a man that looks at you like that. He's so gone. In the winter of 2014, at the Sochi Olympics, Shane runs into the two guys who are playing for Team USA, Scott Hunter, who we met briefly previously, and his fellow New York player Carter Vaughn. They're not super close, but Shane is friendly with them. They agree to go watch Shane's friend compete for figure skating, and Vaughn mentions that you have to be super brave to be as proudly gay as a male figure skater must be, especially in Russia where it is definitely illegal. I'm not sure how much attention you paid to the news during the actual Sochi Olympics, but I can remember this being a topic of discussion for a lot of people. There were some pretty big protests, and countries like the US issued formal travel warnings for people attending the events. It's a little bit glossed over in the show, but I appreciate that they took a moment to acknowledge some of it, since it will become more relevant to Ilya's character in later episodes. At the figure skating event, Shane sees Ilya watching from further up in the stands and decides to go over to talk to him, since he hasn't been answering his texts. They get in an argument and leave on pretty bad terms. Later, Ilya gets chewed out by his dad for Team Russia losing to Latvia, and we get the first implication that Ilya's dad is suffering from dementia. Svetlana, who is the daughter of a famous Russian goalie, shows up to whisk Ilya away. She takes him to a super fancy bathroom where their mutual acquaintance/friend Sasha is waiting. Sasha is a former hookup of Ilya's, and when he tries to initiate something, Ilya shoots him down. Looks like he's slowly becoming a one-man kind of guy. Keyword, slowly. Back in Canada after the Olympics, Shane visits Hayden's house for a watch party and gets to watch as the Boston Raiders win the MLH Cup. In a moment of excellent face acting from Hudson Williams, we see the conflicting emotions on his face. It's clear he's kind of happy for Ilya, especially since he just got completely crushed at the Olympics, But this also means he's losing in their rivalry. Ilya won an MLH Cup first, and the fact that the two aren't really speaking right now must compound some of those conflicting feelings. We jump ahead to the summer at the MLH Awards for the year, and Shane and Ilya are presenting an award together. It's low-key kind of awkward, and afterwards Shane runs off to the bathroom to have a bit of a breakdown. Ilya follows him, and they argue a bit more in the bathroom. They talk about their relationship, and Shane calls Ilya out for not acknowledging his existence outside of the press and demands him to essentially define the relationship, but Ilya doesn't have answers. Ilya is able to calm Shane down a bit with some sexy talk, and then we get the iconic bathroom scene that consumed everyone's brain. Once again, Shane is unable to hide the absolute adoration on his face as Ilya flirts and taunts him, and of all the angry emotions he was just letting out completely melt away. Ilya proposes a deal. If Shane wins MVP, then Ilya will do whatever he wants. Doesn't really end up mattering since Ilya wins, and he sort of flips the deal on the head and takes charge later when they meet up for their hookup. I'm not sure how much of it I can describe without literally getting banned from YouTube, but Ilya decides that he gets to call all the shots. They hook up, seemingly with more emotion from Shane than ever, and while I can't show it, this is also where we get the famous Hudson Williams arch scene. If you know, you know, and if you don't know, you are free to look it up. Definitely don't think I can show this on YouTube. After their hookup, Shane tries to initiate pillow talk, but Ilya is emotionally disconnected, so Shane leaves. In the elevator, he almost sends a text about how they didn't even kiss, while Ilya just sits back and smokes a cigarette. Very much a bittersweet ending, but as half of a two-part premiere, you can see why everyone was immediately hooked. I'd argue that this second episode has some of the spiciest scenes in the show, and includes some of the most iconic moments as well, with the stairwell and the Vegas bathroom and the hotel room with the chair and so on. There's a lot of moments to choose between for my favorite, but I'm gonna have to go with the Vegas bathroom when Ilya calms Shane down. The acting from Connor is great as always, but this episode definitely shows how incredible Hudson Williams' face acting is, and this scene is the best for that. You can literally see every emotion as it goes through his eyes, and the way he says genetic just has me and the rest of the world in a complete chokehold. That week between the double premiere and the third episode was full of me just repeating this episode and that whole scene just to see it all again. Absolute masterclass. When talking about this show, people in general like to label the episodes as either Shane episodes or Ilya episodes, based on who gets the stronger character moments and who drives the plot, but more than probably any other episode in the series, this one is very balanced. Of course, on Shane's side we have the stairwell, Boston winning the MLH Cup, the Vegas bathroom, and the elevator that shows how he's completely fallen for Ilya, even if his brain hasn't completely caught up to the fact yet. It's written all over his face. I think this episode does a really good job of showing the subtle differences that move Shane from his place in the first episode, which is mostly lusting after Ilya and linking the discovery of his identity with the deepening of their sexual chemistry, and takes it to a place where we, the audience, can tell that his feelings are deeper while the character still thinks he's in a stagnant relationship. To Shane, their hookups almost check boxes, where they do the same things, they talk a little, and they flirt and banter, and he gets some kisses out of it too. So when he leaves at the end of the episode after what is definitely their most intimate and charged hookup yet, but one that didn't include any pillow talk or kissing, it short-circuits his brain a little. He's in that elevator wondering what's actually going on and whether or not he knows as much about their arrangement as he thinks he does. This is something that Shane does a bunch throughout the series, and it's almost certainly a character behavior that comes from the character's place on the autism spectrum. He's following those social cues he's come to expect with their hookups, and when they're not there, he immediately notices. Shane is also prone to overthinking, and the number of times he types out texts only to delete them and change his mind is a real clear marker of this too. Again, the series is showing us rather than telling us that Shane is like this, and it will definitely continue to show us the different ways Shane's anxiety impacts his decisions moving forward. However, despite all these great Shane character moments, we still get a ton on Ilya's side of things too. There's all of what happens in Russia with Svetlana and Sasha, as well as the emotional disconnect at the end, the way he's able to seamlessly comfort and take control of their dynamic in the Vegas bathroom, and of course, the moments with his father. It might not be apparent right away, but there is a hell of a lot going on in this episode that has nothing to do with the spicy stuff, and I feel like the greater public could use a reminder that just because the show and its source material have great smut, does not mean that the character moments and the drama isn't still there. I brought it up when the scene happened, but I think it's also telling that Ilya turns Sasha down in the Russian bathroom. It's clear, and it will remain clear later, that Ilya and Shane's whole thing at this point is not exclusive. I mean, it'll become clearer for Shane later when they talk about it, but there's no expectation for either of them that the other is celibate in the months they can't meet up. And Ilya be fucking. However, he makes the choice in that Russian bathroom to turn Sasha down. Even if this is just a rivals with benefits for him at this point, he has those deeper feelings that we, the audience, can see. It's just like with Shane, who doesn't think he has feelings, but we can see them plain as day. Also, shout out to the way that the two bathrooms are so distinct. The one in Russia is this giant opulent bathroom full of gold, and yet Ilya does not want to be there and does not connect with Sasha, who's trying to initiate something. Then in Vegas, they're in this dingy gray box, and he has this deeply emotional connection to Shane, and both initiates kisses and accepts the intimacy back. The parallels are so starkly different, and it makes that Vegas scene all the more satisfying and emotional. Absolute 10 out of 10 scene. I might be completely off base here, but I think that there is a bit of recognition in Ilya throughout this episode, though. I know I just went on and on about how he's got these feelings that only we see, but it's definitely at a point in this episode when he starts to see it for himself. I think that Ilya's behavior at the Olympics is a tell for this, since he's still being pressured by the looming presence of his country and his father and those expectations, so he distances himself from Shane in the one place that he knows is the least safe for both of them. He chooses not to hook up with Sasha, and then when he's back in the US and the MLH award rolls around, he slowly starts opening back up and letting Shane in. Of course, there's the whole bathroom moment, but then he sort of regresses again after the hookup and comes across almost cold and unfeeling. I think this is another moment where he's recognizing that there are feelings growing for Shane and he's trying to push them down. Maybe it was the moment he realized he was able to talk Shane down from his panic, maybe it was something that happened while they were in bed, but he definitely realizes that something is changing. We'll see soon that Ilya is completely changing his ways, and it's all because of Shane. But not quite yet, because now it's time for something completely different. Episode 3, titled Hunter, puts the Shane and Ilya storyline to the side for a second and tells us something about someone else who is going to be important for the grand scheme of things. Remember Scott Hunter? Yeah, he's shown up a few times at this point, but now we're going to get a deeper look at what's been going on with him. We open on the scene from the 2014 Olympics, but this time focus on our favorite recurring face, Scott. We jump back a little before the Olympics, and he's been in a major slump on the ice. He goes into a smoothie store and meets Kip, the adorable barista behind the counter who recommends a blueberry smoothie with a banana added in. He definitely flirts with Kip here, and since we have a bit of a clue that he's into dudes by the way the show is set up, it seems like he's crushing on Kip pretty much right away. When he leaves, a different customer makes it clear to him that he was just talking to a famous hockey player, and he and his coworker Maria are pretty sure he was being flirted with. That night, Scott does quite well at his game, so he returns to his smoothie shop the next day and orders another one. He flirts with Kip again and then does well again, and so on. He comes back for his recurring smoothie and decides to invite Kip to the game using his reserved seats, so Kip brings his friend Elena. We get a quick look at Ilya and Shane later, when we see that both Boston and Montreal beat New York on the ice, and Scott makes a comment to Shane about how he's starting to sound like Ilya. The slightest insinuation that someone knows about him and Ilya makes Shane fly off the handle. This is a great time to remind you to go and watch the episodes when you're done here, because this moment, among others, is really great. Another night, Kip is trying to make some extra money for the grad schools he's applying to, so he's working as a waiter at a fancy event. Turns out Scott is present and they flirt some more. Scott invites Kip out to dinner, but when the restaurant looks busy, they decide to get back to Scott's place instead. They hook up and it's magical. Kip stays the night after, and then Scott has a vulnerable moment and says he also hopes Kip is still there when he gets back from practice. Scott is coming into this relationship with a U-Haul on standby apparently, because he's basically ready for them to move in together full-time. When you know, I guess. The two spend more time together to the point where Kip starts to spend less time with some of his friends and even his dad. Kip brings Scott to an art show, but Scott is too nervous about being seen and recognized with another man in public, so they leave pretty quickly. Kip is great about the whole situation since he knows that he's with someone who isn't in a position to come out, but obviously it still sucks that he can't be open about who he's seeing. Scott has an away game, so Kip buys him some fun socks with bananas on them to remind him of the smoothie and how they met. He wears them during the game, and they do well. Scott also picks up a suit for Kip to wear, which he fittingly leaves in the closet for him. They go to a special black tie event, Kip wearing his new suit, and Elena has a conversation with Scott about how it's unfair to keep him a secret. When they get back to Scott's apartment later, they have a pretty serious conversation and Scott apologizes for not being able to come out. Kip decides to go back to his own place with his dad, and while it's not super clear, they are still seeing each other. The episode ends with Scott giving a big speech at the event where he talks about how important hockey is to him since the passing of his parents, and it becomes clearer to us, the audience, that he feels he's in a position where he has to choose between hockey, the thing he loves that has been his whole life, and the guy he's seeing, the person he loves that could be the rest of his life. We also see Kip out with his friends, having been accepted into grad school, but Scott just watches them through the window because they can't be together in person. We close on Scott at the 2014 Olympics wearing these special banana socks but covering them up with another pair as well. It's kind of a downer ending for the episode, but it gives a great look at some of the other major players in the show. Scott and Kip are the entire focus of that first book in the series, of course, and some things that happen in their story are essential for Shane and Ilya's story later, so it's important that we get that here and now. I like Scott and Kip together, and I'm also amazed at how Jacob Tierney was able to cram all this into just one episode of TV. That first book is as long as the book for Heated Rivalry, and yet Heated Rivalry gets 5 dedicated episodes. My favorite scene this episode is probably the time that Scott visits Kip at work and decides to stick around for a bit, talking about serial killers and then inviting him to the game. It's the turning point in their relationship, and also what I'd consider a turning point in Scott's character, because he does have the courage to ignore any possible repercussions and go for what he wants anyways. It's sweet. The suit in the closet and the banana socks are probably some of the clearest symbolism we get in the show, too. The suit, of course, being left for Kip hanging in the closet where he almost doesn't see it. It's a testament to the way that Scott has been keeping Kip hidden. Really nice and pretty, but alone and locked away in his apartment. Then there's the socks, which are pretty clearly a symbol for their relationship. They remind both Scott and Kip visually of how they met, and when Scott wears them, he always has to hide them away too, whether it's just in the skates or under another pair of socks completely. He's got his friends on the team like Carter Vaughn, who we see hanging around here and there, but he can't share the news about his relationship with anyone. It's some more visual storytelling, and I really appreciate they don't have Kip sit down and explain how these are representations of our relationship, or wow, I wish he didn't keep me hidden like he did with this suit, and we have to actually rub some brain cells together. I've seen some critiques about this episode as well, but mostly they're just nitpicky. In the book, their romance is very, very fast, and in the series they extended it a bit so it takes place over multiple years instead, which I think was a great decision. Scott is already really quick to be so in deep for Kip, so the extra time makes it feel a little more reasonable. People have also criticized the fact that Robbie GK, who plays Kip, is absolutely shredded, even compared to some of the hockey players, but I don't think that's that big of a deal. To bring the focus back to Shane and Ilya real quick, I like that this episode shows us a different perspective on how people see them. There's sort of a hinting in the first 2 episodes that Scott might know more about Shane and Ilya than he's letting on, since he's always side-eyeing them, but it's so much clearer when we look at Scott's story that he's dealing with his own issues and does not speculate about them at all. It's almost complete luck that he says his comment to Shane on the ice in the first place, since he just so happened to play both of their teams back-to-back and hears similar chirps from them. You can tell by the look on his face that he kind of surprised that Shane reacts the way he does, and I doubt that he was trying to be deliberately nasty with his comment either. I'm sure if he sat down and thought about it, he might be able to put the pieces together, but it's also in the midst of some of his most complicated problems, so he's really not paying that much attention to them. We put the Scott and Kip storyline to the side more clearly in episode 4, titled Rose. We open on an extended montage showing us all the things that Shane and Ilya have been up to since Shane didn't send his elevator text. In the summer of 2014, Ilya goes back to Russia and the two spend their off-season training and flirting over text. We see lots of times that Shane is sitting alone in his house while Ilya is out partying and hooking up with women. Shane films a commercial for a drink he doesn't even drink himself, and whenever they have a game in the same city, they meet up afterward to hook up. The Montreal Metros win the MLH Cup, not one but twice, and by the end of the montage we see that Ilya isn't really entertaining any new hookups anymore. We jump to the fall of 2016 and Shane accompanies his teammate and bestie Hayden to the aquarium. Hayden asks him about his love life, and he tentatively agrees to go on an arranged date. Ilya watches footage of a segment Shane did where he talks about the cottage he spends all his summers at, where he's doing yoga and bragging about how private it is. Later, when Shane is in Boston, both Hayden and Svetlana separately clock Shane and Ilya about the mysterious women and their phone contacts, and Shane runs off to Ilya's house for the first time. They hook up, of course, and then Ilya convinces Shane to stay a little longer. He provides him with a ginger ale that he happens to have in his house and even volunteers to make them both tuna melts, which coincidentally Shane loves. There's a quick moment where they watch a hockey game on TV and talk about Ryan Price, who's the lead hockey player in the 3rd book of the series, Tough Guy, which is a nice little Easter egg. They talk a bit and Ilya mentions that he sometimes sleeps with Svetlana, and he describes her as a girl who knows everything about hockey that he sometimes hooks up with. Shane is visibly not pleased by this, but he doesn't say that. When Ilya tells him that he also likes girls, Shane agrees even though we know he's lying through his teeth. They get interrupted when Ilya gets a call from his father, who is not doing great. Ilya's shitty brother hasn't been taking great care of him, plus his dementia is progressing and Ilya is noticeably upset that he can't be there to help. When he gets back into the room, they cuddle very briefly before Shane initiates another round, and after the two call each other by their first names for the first time in the heat of the moment, Shane has a moment of panic and decides to leave. There's a lot going on here, but I promise we'll come back to it when we talk analysis in a bit. Shane meets up with his parents for lunch, and while he's moody at first, he eventually masks up and starts agreeing with whatever they say. They can tell something's up, but they don't push it. Later, he caves and agrees to go out to the bar with some of his teammates. While he's there, he is unsuccessful at ordering a ginger ale, and then meets a girl named Rose Landry, who is a super famous actress that is in town filming a new movie. She's basically equivalent to Jennifer Lawrence in terms of fame. She knows who he is, of course, and they talk a bit about hockey at first, and then her career and so on. They vibe pretty well, and sure enough, the magazines and tabloids start running articles about the two of them possibly being in a relationship, which Ilya sees. She goes to his games wearing his jersey, she's taking Ilya's place and texting him before his games, and the tabloids are eating it up. A while later, while in Montreal, their usual hookup is not happening, and Ilya has had enough of seeing the news, so he decides to go out to a club. By complete chance, this is the same night that Shane agreed to go out with Rose and her actor friends to the same club. With all the things she said by tattoo blasting in the background, Ilya sees Rose's friend Miles at the bar, recognizes him, realizes that it means Rose is there, and then realizes that it means Shane is probably also there, so he turns around and starts looking for Shane. Sure enough, he sees him dancing with Rose. Because he's very messy at this point, Ilya decides to take the opportunity to grab a random girl and make out with her, which, of course, Shane happens to see. They lock eyes on the floor of the club, but they don't do anything about it. We got some cutting back and forth between Shane taking Rose back to his apartment for sex, and Ilya returning to his place alone to take care of himself in the shower. It's a jam-packed episode and full of moments that I've got to talk more about. But first, I think my favorite scene in the episode is either Shane and Hayden at the aquarium, or when Shane and Ilya are on the couch together and use their first names for the first time. The couch scene is super pivotal for them, but the scene at the aquarium is full of really tight back and forth dialogue and some fun interactions between Hayden and his kids, so it's a tough choice. As for moments to look deeper at, oh boy, there's a few. The fact that the episode starts with Shane alone while Ilya hooks up with people and ends with Ilya alone while Shane hooks up with Rose, perfect. No notes. If it wasn't already clear that the thought of Shane has changed Ilya's habits and behaviors, then it definitely should be at this point. They're not even exclusive still, and yet Ilya slowly continues to pull back on sleeping with other people. I mentioned before he seemed to have reserved his hooking up with dudes card for Shane, but now he's saving it almost entirely for Shane, with the exception of maybe Svetlana. Even that is arguable at this point. The tuna melt scene is a big one too, since it's a little suspicious that Ilya just so happens to have all the ingredients required for one of the meals Shane will actually eat, and we know he's on a very particular diet plan, as well as a fresh fridge ginger ale for him to drink. Someone has been paying close attention to the Shane Hollander documentaries and has been taking notes. I'm just saying. He plans the entire first trip to his house meticulously, provides Shane's favorite food and drink, convinces him to stay the night, and it's almost working out until he slips Shane's first name out in the heat of the moment. If you think you're fooling anyone, Ilya, it's definitely not me. Now, Shane is another story. We already established that I think Shane has gone on Ilya at this point too, but he didn't have the full realization until the moment when they use their first names. In that moment, everything comes crashing down, and Shane realizes maybe this is something more than he thought it was. His head catches up with his heart, and he doesn't know what to do. We know he's definitely into guys, but it doesn't seem like Shane has put a lot of thought into it, and he has all of this realization at the same time. I also don't think it's a coincidence that he ends up going for Rose. When Ilya tells him about Svetlana on the couch, one of the only descriptors Shane gets is that she knows a lot about hockey. Then when he's out at the bar, he runs into Rose, who happens to talk a lot about hockey and knows a lot too. Do I think that Shane deliberately chooses to be with Rose out of a manipulative attempt to de-gay himself? No, not really. I think he's still equating a lot of his identity discover with Ilya, probably doesn't realize how much of their so-called rivalry he's still internalizing, and ends up going after the same things that Ilya already kinda has. If he's in denial about his sexuality, which he definitely still is at this point, then he's going to try to find the perfect woman that can convince him it's just a phase. And if Rose is pretty, knows a lot about hockey, and is super fun, then she is that perfect woman for him. If it worked for Ilya, it should work for him, right? Well, that's a lesson that Shane is going to have to learn on his own. The needle drop with all the things she said is an elite moment too, and I absolutely love how the intro synthesizer starts while he's still in his hotel room and the drums kick in just as he enters the room. Absolutely amazing. On top of being a great beat, the song is written by a Russian pop duo Tattoo about a lesbian fantasy that she had while under anesthesia at the dentist, and is packed full of queer symbolism, so it's a great pick here for Ilya's character. Connor Story actually picked the song as one that he feels matches Ilya's character during an interview at the Montreal premiere before he knew the song was included in the show. Just goes to show the production team and the actors were on the same page creatively. Episode 5, titled I'll Believe in Anything, is widely seen as the best episode of the season. For a little while, it was even tied for the highest rated episode of TV ever made, according to IMDb. Then, of course, it got review bombed. Still, at the time of writing, every episode ranks at 9.4 or higher, with both this episode and the next one ranking at 9.9, which is actually incredible. We love to see it. The episode opens after one of Shane and Rose's nights together. Shane apologizes for his poor performance in bed, and Rose heads off. We hear from the podcast announcer that the All-Star game is coming up, and this time they'll be doing East versus West Coast, so Shane and Ilya will be playing on the same team. Shane goes to dinner with Rose, and she lets him down easy. She suspects that she's not doing it for him and asks if he might be gay. Shane denies it at first, but the more they get to talking, he admits that he thinks he's completely gay and that he prefers being on the bottom. The whole time he's remembering back to romantic and flirty moments with Ilya, and it's very cute. She doesn't take it poorly at all, and she makes him promise that they'll stay friends. In Florida, where the All-Star game is going to take place, Shane and Ilya meet up at the hotel bar and talk for the first time in a while. Shane has been designated captain of the All-Star team, which is great for him, and Ilya is wearing a nice tropical shirt. Shane confesses to Ilya that he and Rose weren't compatible, and the two open up and get a little more comfortable. Shane also admits that he's hired a stylist, which Ilya finds hilarious. Later, Shane relaxes by the pool while Ilya plays with some of the kids, and it comes across very domestic. It's nice to see a bit of a goofy side to Ilya here, since we know it's there, but Shane doesn't often get to see it, since his face is in the mattress. The All-Star game goes well, and Shane and Ilya play amazingly together. Since they're working together, they can show a bit of a public affection, and you can tell that these two are upping each other's games. Later after the game, they meet up on the beach to watch the sunset and continue their earlier conversation. Ilya has since looked up the definition of compatible and confirms that Shane is no longer seeing Rose. He looks around to make sure no one's looking and then initiates a hand touch. For now, this is the most intimate they can be in public. Then Shane asks which room Ilya is in. When he gets there, instead of immediately leading into a hookup like usual, they have a serious conversation. Shane comes out to Ilya officially, even if it was kind of clear to him, and says that he feels like the connection that the two of them have is more than just meaningless hookups. He also apologizes for getting scared and running away from Ilya's house the last time they hooked up. Ilya says it doesn't matter since they can't be together anyways, and Shane asks him whether he would want to try if it was possible. We finally get some confessions on Ilya's side too, since he admits that he does want that, but it can never happen because he would not be able to go back to Russia or face his family. He tells Shane that his mother died when he was young and explains the family dynamic with his brother and father and about his dad's dementia. He starts to cry, so Shane climbs in his lap and they hug it out. We get a fade to black moment here, but it's assumed they also hooked up. As Shane leaves, they say goodnight to each other using their first names, this time no panicking involved. At their next game, Boston wins, and then later on Shane overhears in the locker room that Ilya did not fly to Nashville to play the next team. The news outlets haven't reported anything else, but he gets worried and texts Ilya to no avail. A bit later, Ilya responds by video calling Shane and tells him that his dad passed away, so he went back to Russia. We see Ilya going through funeral-related services, including a family meal where he gets dirty looks from his brother. He steps out and then his brother confronts him in the hallway for avoiding him. He wants to know how the money will be handled moving forward, and Ilya gets mad at him for not giving any time to grieve. Also because he's an asshole. When Svetlana shows up to interrupt them and Alexei insults her, Ilya lashes out and hits his brother. He tells Alexei that he can have his apartment in Russia and that he'll set aside a trust fund for his niece, but otherwise he's no longer allowed to contact him for any reason or he'll ruin his name throughout Moscow. Alexei understands he's not fucking around, so he leaves. Svetlana tells him that she'll stay by his side no matter what, and that whoever Jane is, he is very lucky. Ilya goes out on a walk and calls Shane, and Shane suggests he say everything on his mind, but that he should say it in Russian. That way, Ilya can say whatever he needs to without translating, and Shane won't understand, so it's a chance for him to rant and say anything he's been holding back. Buckle up, because it's a great speech. Ilya says he hates it in Russia because his family all hate him, but that they use him for money anyways. He puts in a lot of effort to make sure everything is perfect, but he never gets gratitude from any of them. He resents that his brother took care of their dad in his last days, and that he couldn't because he was in North America funding their lives. At the same time, cutting them off means his only connections are with Svetlana, who he loves. And then comes the big one. He loves her, but not in the way he loves Shane. He admits to being completely consumed by his love for Shane and that he doesn't know what to do about it. Shane, of course, doesn't understand Russian, so he just listens. He says he needs Ilya to teach him Russian one day, and they bicker and flirt about it. A week later, it's Montreal versus Boston, and the two of them are planning to meet up again after the game. On the ice, however, Shane looks back at Ilya for a moment and gets checked pretty badly by Ilya's buddy Marlowe, knocking him out and stopping the game for a bit. Ilya stands by looking helpless while Shane is loaded onto a stretcher and taken away, trying unsuccessfully to get the medics to tell Ilya that he's okay. In the hospital later, Ilya goes to see Shane, who's completely loopy and out of his mind. In the book, Ilya actually intends to break it off with Shane completely after this game, but when he sees Shane lying in the bed, he feels nothing but protective and loving over him and decides not to. While he's drugged up, Shane invites Ilya to his cottage for the summer, and Ilya tells him maybe. He ducks out when the nurse shows up, and still no definitive answer to Shane's request. Later on, Shane has his arm in a sling, and he talks on the phone with Rose, who's back in Montreal to film reshoots for her movie. Shane's parents have been asking if she's going to come by during the summer, and Rose encourages him to tell them that she is actually gay, and that they aren't seeing each other anymore. She'll take the fall for him. Inside, Shane and his parents watch the Boston hockey game, and unfortunately they lose to New York, so both Shane and Ilya are out of the running for the cup this year. A week later, it's the MLH Cup Finals, and Shane and Ilya are messaging each other during the game. New York ends up winning, which means that our friend Scott Hunter has won the cup. In a moment of spontaneous bravery, Scott invites Kip down from the stands and kisses him on the live TV. Shane, Ilya, Shane's parents, and pretty much the entire hockey-watching world sees the entire thing. Now more confident that maybe their relationship could work, Ilya calls Shane and tells him he's coming to the cottage. This episode really is fantastic, and it's stuffed full of so many good moments. My favorite scene is probably Shane in the hospital, since it's tender and also a little funny, but the speech in Russian over the phone is a super close second. If we're gonna go for pure emotional impact, the speech easily takes the cake. I love that Ilya finally gets an opportunity to say everything he's feeling, a lot like Shane does to Rose at the beginning of the episode, or like he does to Ilya in the hotel room in Florida. It's been the entire season of anticipation, but finally we get to know almost all of the thoughts in his head. The fact that he resents not being able to be there for his dad is a heartbreaking feeling, and the love confession at the end had me kicking my feet just as much as I was crying. The moment at the hotel bar in Florida is another great one, since we know that Ilya had been following the news of Shane and Rose's relationship almost pathologically, so having his jealousy get squashed and the opportunity for both of them to speak in public freely was really nice. As we'll see later, it's nice when they have these situations that make it plausible for them to interact openly without there being suspicion cast on them. I also love the domestic moment when Ilya's in the pool, and the way they play off of each other in the All-Star game is super satisfying. They're the best players in the league for a reason. If I had one complaint, it would have to do with Shane's injury on the ice. I don't think this makes a lot of sense for Shane, who is arguably the best player in the entire league, to look back at Ilya when he has the puck. It doesn't happen that way in the book, and I get that it was probably shot like this for dramatic effect and camera positioning and whatnot, but it feels like such a rookie mistake for Shane to be distracted in the slightest while in possession of the puck. No real spoilers for the later books either, but it kind of undermines some of the credibility he has moving forward. We'll see in the next episode, his mom asks about this moment and he admits it wasn't intentional, but he is so clearly distracted by Ilya that it literally costs his team the chance to win, and maybe even the chance of the cup as well. I just don't believe that Shane would make a mistake like this. Still, his accident is a devastating moment, and the way that Ilya hovers over him and constantly gets told to get out of the way is heartbreaking. I mean, this guy literally just lost his father and then proclaimed that Shane is one of 2 people in the entire world that he cares for, and then Shane goes and gets completely demolished. It's a testament of how much control he has despite the panic, since he very well could have raised a path in his fury. Maybe he did off screen, but thankfully he was more in control when the cameras were on. Another accident-related moment that people tend to mention was changed from the book is that Shane never says out loud to Ilya that they can see us, since we see the immediate aftermath of the hit from the point of view of the cameras. I don't mind this change, and I kind of like the focus shifting to the way the public perceive the accident, since it helps to assure us that it won't risk their relationship coming to light on top of the physical injuries. Shifting gears completely, the Scott and Kip moment on the ice is fantastic. It pretty much wraps up the Scott and Kip storyline from their dedicated episode, and it opens the door for a huge pivot in Shane and Ilya's relationship. I love that Elena and Kip's dad are there too, but I suppose that means they're not sitting in Scott's 2 dedicated seats. I also love how it's so obvious as soon as Scott calls him down the first time what's about to happen, and yet there's still a little bit of doubt in the back of your mind that it's going to end in a kiss all the way up until he starts to lean in. Like, he could have stopped at just bringing Kip onto the ice and celebrating, but Scott Hunter does not do things halfway, I guess. All in all, a fantastic episode and one of the best bits of TV I've seen in a long time. The finale of the first season, episode 6, The Cottage, starts exactly where you think it would. Ilya getting off a plane in Ottawa and getting in Shane's car to head to the cottage. Well, actually no, it starts with Scott Hunter's speech at the MLH Awards instead. We have one last bit of their story to wrap up before we get to the cottagecore domestic bliss. Scott wins the award for MVP, which makes sense considering he's the captain of the team that won the cup and he has a major comeback from a multi-year slump, and he talks about his private life and his relationship with Kip a little. He recognizes that being a figurehead and role model for queer people in hockey is an important position, and Kip is at the bar with his friends watching the entire thing. Sort of strange he's not in the audience, but I digress. Now, back at the Ottawa airport, Shane picks up Ilya and they start going to the cottage. When they arrive, Ilya doesn't even get the full tour before they're making out on the couch. They have some restraint and they move into the bedroom that they'll be sharing for the next few weeks, complete with fancy automatic blinds. Later, things get even more domestic as Shane makes enough food to feed an entire family, and Ilya asks about Shane's parents and whether or not they know that he's gay. They don't, and Shane feels bad that he's basically been lying to them about who he is. At night, they're sitting by the fire when Ilya hears a loon out on the water and gets freaked out by the sound. As the night progresses, Ilya opens up more and more about his mother and how she would have loved Shane. She struggled heavily with depression and died by suicide, and she's also Ilya's favorite person. Aside from Shane, of course. Later on in the trip, the two of them play a hockey video game that Ilya is on the cover of, but Hayden calls to talk to Shane and interrupts. Ilya gets the clever idea of initiating a hookup while Shane is on the phone, and we get a fun and spicy scene of the two of them trying not to make too much noise. Because the most emotional moments seem to happen when it's dark, they are relaxing together on the couch when they talk about how Ilya is free to switch hockey teams in the upcoming season, and that he wants to drop his Russian passport and get citizenship somewhere else. He suggests marrying Svetlana, which Shane is visibly not happy about, so he says maybe he should wait and marry a woman he's actually in love with. Ilya says that won't happen, since while he likes women, he is currently obsessed with a particular hockey player. Because Shane is exactly like me, he sits up at night in the pitch dark thinking about solutions to Ilya's passport problems. Ilya can play for Ottawa, which is close to Montreal and can still afford Ilya's salary. Then they can start a charity and use it as a plausible reason for the two of them to shift their rivalry into a friendship in the press. Then they can be together more easily and still cover all their bases. This leads to Ilya saying that he loves Shane, in English this time so he understands, and Shane says it back. The relationship isn't exactly defined, but we've crossed that hurdle. Later, Shane suggests that their charity be a summer hockey camp that donates money to mental health organizations, and Ilya explains how to say I love you in Russian, so Shane will always know when he says it. My heart is actually melting. There's a fun domestic scene where Ilya plays in the water and Shane sits on a rock, which might be my favorite scene in the show compared to how little it affects the plot. But I just love the way this looks. Reminds me a lot of growing up around the lakes in Ontario. When they're coming back to the cottage from the water, they're all being cutesy and domestic and kissing, but Shane's dad is inside the house and sees them. Before Shane can go in and talk to him, he books it out the front door and drives back to their place, which is nearby. Shane starts panicking and Ilya is able to calm him down a bit and suggests that they go to his parents to talk about the whole thing. They drive over and start an awkward conversation, with Shane coming out to them officially and introducing them to Ilya. His parents are confused, obviously, but Shane makes it clear that he loves Ilya and that he intended to tell them a different way. They move the conversation into the kitchen, and then they tell Shane's parents that the whole quote-unquote relationship has been happening pretty much since before their rookie season. His mom asks if he ever lets Ilya win on the ice, and it's a definitive no in that regard. A lot like when they first comforted each other at the press conference in the first episode, they touch their feet together in a secret-ish show of support. Shane and his mom step outside for a moment to talk more, and Shane apologizes for not being able to live up to her expectations and push down his gayness, but she reassures him that he has nothing to apologize for. She apologizes to him for making him feel like he had to keep it a secret, and they head back inside. Shane's mom immediately goes into manager mode and starts thinking about how to prepare a statement, but Shane and Ilya don't plan to come out publicly at all yet. They reiterate the plan that Shane came up with at the dark of night. Ilya will move to Ottawa and play for them, and they'll start up their charity together. The season officially ends as the two of them drive away from Shane's parents' place, leaving out just a little bit of the book where we get an idea of what the future holds exactly for the two of them. I won't go into it since I have a feeling it'll be at the beginning of season 2, or otherwise made super clear, but they said a few times in this episode what the plan was, and then when have we ever seen these two back down? As far as finales go, this one is pretty satisfying. Since it's adapting a novel, the fact it ends pretty much right at the end is fine, even if it kind of leaves something open-ended. We're still left wondering how the future will look for them, whether or not they'll make it, how the future impacts of Scott and Kip's kiss will play out, and so on. But we had all those same questions in the book as well, so I can't knock the show for being a good adaptation. Plus, we do know there's a second season coming, so we will be getting these answers in the second season. As far as season 2 goes, I think it's basically guaranteed to be an adapting book 6, The Long Game, and will likely have an episode dedicated to book 5, Role Model, since that one has the most overlap with Shane and Ilya's story. I can't say for certain if we'll see parts of book 3 or 4, since those ones feature Shane and Ilya much less, and we don't lose anything from their story by omitting some of those details. Maybe they'll make really good interim episodes or TV specials or something. Since the show follows Shane and Ilya, I just don't see it being as likely. Role Model is just as essential to their story as Game Changer was, so I'm sure we'll be getting lots of Troy and Harris in our future. And if I'm lucky, even more in my future. Anyways, back to the episode. I think my favorite scene has got to be the kitchen conversation with Holanov and Shane's parents. We get a ton of great moments out of it, the first time they say they're boyfriends, the humorous visuals, and a solidifying their future plans. Though, like I said, the scene of them in the water is probably my favorite overall scene. It just doesn't have a huge impact on the story. Scott's speech at the beginning is hugely important, especially since it kind of lays out exactly how much of an impact it had on Shane and Ilya's story as well. What Scott chose to do basically paved the way for any queer future in this sport, and we know it directly led to Ilya agreeing to come to the cottage. I mean, he was literally packing a bag to go to Russia when it happened, and he jumped on the opportunity. I wish there was a bit of a budget to show an audience and that Kip was in said audience, but having him at the bar with all his friends was a nice consolation. That bar is a big thing for Scott and Kip's future, so it was a nice nod. I wonder how much we'll see of the two of them moving forward, since they have a much less drastic impact on Shane and Ilya's story from here on out. I hope we get some good cameos, because I really liked both Francois Arnault and Robbie GK. This episode is full of people crying, and I have to shout out both Hudson Williams and Connor Story again for their crying talent. Hudson has this thing where he tears up and they sort of hang out on his eyelashes, which absolutely destroys me every time. It happens a few times in this episode, and especially during the conversation with his mom, I just lost it. Connor has this talent for having the perfect crying streak down one side of his face, and if you watch carefully during the credits, you can actually see one there too. Happy tears, I imagine, but they are so perfect that it almost feels like they're fake. Feels kind of weird congratulating someone for crying, it's just so impressive. I also love how much we get to hear about Ilya's mom in this episode. She's been this ever-present shadow in a lot of Ilya's scenes, but finally getting to know exactly what she meant to him and what exactly happened brings a lot of depth to his thoughts. If you go back and rewatch the show, you can pick out all the different moments when he's thinking about her. Especially when you know that the cross he wears belonged to her, it adds another layer that you can appreciate and keep an eye out for every time with new details. And that's the first season of the show. Holy shit. I don't know about you, but I am feeling the urge to start it all over from the beginning. If this was one of my Teen Wolf videos, I would include a breakdown of who died and who was still alive, but let's be real. The only people who died here are the viewers because, oh my god, that finale? No hate to the books, but I really do think the show is the stronger representation of the story, which is high praise. Very, very rarely is the adaptation comparable or even better than the book, but this is definitely one of those cases. The story is given so much depth by the performances, and I think the effort of interpreting the looks on their faces and what you think is going on works a little better than having it narrated to you by the inner thoughts. There's just so much complexity in each of these looks. There's also a few tweaks I thought worked pretty well in the series. Like I said before, they kind of extended the timeline for Scott and Kip's romance, which is one of the biggest complaints people have about that whole book, so that worked really well. Some lines that seem to be more explicitly spoken in the book, like the one when Shane is injured on the ice, are more implied to be internal thoughts here, which I think also works because that was a major giveaway for anyone present that there's something going on between the two of them. It's iconic and one of the more emotionally tense moments in the book, but the scene works out just as well without it, so I don't really mind. I am open to change as long as it's handled well, like in this case. What I will do is take this opportunity to go through and give my thoughts about each important character in the show. Thankfully, there's not as many as you'd think. Shane is my favorite character, but this show makes it a tough race for first place. I can absolutely empathize with his situation, and more than most of the characters in other romances, I can completely understand almost every single decision he makes the entire season. The longing looks he gives Ilya throughout the season are stuck in my brain pretty much all the time, especially this one in the Vegas bathroom and this one when he's sitting in the stairwell in that same episode. This boy is so oblivious to his own feelings at this point, but we see it clear as day. And I love that. Hudson plays this character so well, and he completely loses himself in the character so that the way he acts in interviews and the way he behaves in the show are basically two different people. One of the breakout stars of the year, for sure. There's also more emphasis placed on Shane's Asian identity than there was in the book, which I thought worked in the show. It's not super prominent throughout the season, but you can't miss it. I think it adds an extra layer of pressure for Shane to perform well and keep his career at the forefront of his mind, since he's also experiencing what it's like to be a trailblazer for the sport for his identity already. He's experienced firsthand what it's like to be known for one part of his identity, so it adds to the reasons he hesitates to come out. You can tell he has a little bit of resentment for what he sees as an obligation to champion his identity, and he doesn't feel super keen to do it all again with his sexuality. It works really well, and since none of this is explicitly stated, it adds to the whole aspect that I love about this show where you have to actually think about what you're watching and make these conclusions yourself. Media literacy isn't completely dead, and I love that the show expects you to engage with it just as much as it lets you turn your brain off and enjoy the sexy men in their various positions. And there are a lot of positions. Ilya exemplifies this super well in the show too, since a lot of his emotional arc in the first half of the season is implied rather than stated outright. Fans of the book always talk about how much his mom influences his emotions, and you have to actually think about the way Connor's story tinkers with the cross around his neck to pick up on that until basically the 6th episode. It's phenomenal, and it leaves a lot of rewatchability to the episodes. I swear, every time I rewatch them, I find new details or acting choices that make more and more and more sense to their characters. I was watching an interview on the TV, and a friend of mine walked in the room and was surprised to hear he wasn't actually Russian. I really can't repeat enough how strong Connor Story's performance is as Ilya. His whole character kind of revolves around the sacrifices he makes for other people. He struggles with the fact his father is sick and he isn't able to be around as much as he wants to, but he also feels obligations to provide financially for the rest of his family who demonstrably hate him. The one time he experiences something that is his own choice and makes him happy, he's hit with this big obstacle. He can't have it. It's illegal in his country, it's taboo against the sports league and the public rivalry between them, and it's all compounded by all the emotions that Shane is bringing into it as well. You don't need to have personal experience with any of these feelings that are facing these two to understand how emotionally draining this would be, and it makes the drama that much more satisfying. At the end of episode 5, when he calls and says he's coming to the cottage, it's that much more satisfying because it's a culmination of all the times that Ilya wanted to do something and didn't feel like he could. Scott and Kip changed the game, and now Ilya and Shane can play. He makes sacrifices for his feelings all the way up until the end of the season when he literally chooses Shane over the team that he's been playing with for years in favor of moving to Ottawa, and you bet your ass that season 2 is going to dig into that deeper. I look forward to seeing how Ilya tries to let loose in his new city, especially if I'm standing there as Harris. I'll stop now, I promise. Now, I don't speak Russian, but I've seen lots of people commenting on Connor's performance, and I can't help but feel that it's incredible. He sounds very natural, and it's clear that all the hours he spent with his dialect coach, Kate Yablunovsky, paid off. The way he practically transforms into the role is so incredible to watch, and as much as I love all the performances in this show, I do think that Connor's is probably the strongest. Pick literally any scene he's in and you can physically see the acting choices he's making, and they are all working. Hudson does this too. I don't know. The two of them are just, ugh. For both Shane and Ilya, there isn't a single moment that I didn't love. The performances are incredible. They're incredible in every scene they're in on their own. They're incredible in every scene they're in together. The sexual chemistry between them is actually crazy, and I don't know if you could tell that I was avoiding bringing it up so far, but I can't avoid it anymore. They are hot. They're hot, hot, hot. Watching the two of them have sex on screen low-key makes me feel like I've turned on porn or something, but who's really complaining? Even when they're fucking the brains out, you can actually feel the emotion. Ugh, it's just so good. I finally understand why people are so obsessed with romance. If I had to pick an absolute favorite romantic scene, I'll probably go with the scene on the couch in episode 4 where they call each other by their first names, but my overall favorite scene from the show is also probably the bathroom scene or the one of the two of them in the water. The other characters in this show are good too, don't get me wrong. Shane's parents, Una and David, are really solid too. You'd think at first that his mom is going to get more time to shine since she seems to have more of pressure on him, but when the cottage episode comes around you get a bunch of great interactions with his dad as well. My favorite moment is towards the end of episode 5 when his mom admits she hates Ilya less because he visited Shane in the hospital. They're picture-perfect casting for the parents, even if Christina Chang isn't of Korean descent like Hudson is. I feel like they both captured the spirit of the characters, and I liked the energy in all of their scenes. All of the ones in episode 6 are S tier, and the shot of Shane's dad peeling out of the driveway as fast as possible makes me cackle every time. Ilya's dad has a similar energy since he amplifies all of his scenes, and you really feel for the situation. Yeah, he's an asshole, and he's definitely not the best father, but the way his presence impacts Ilya's character is portrayed clearly, and the actor who plays him, Yaroslav Paverlo, does a great job getting this across with just his impressions. I did some surface level digging, and apparently he's also a professional dialect coach for Russian and Ukrainian dialects, so maybe he was just able to give some comments about Connor's accent too. This is all speculation, but from what we've heard about how friendly the set was, I don't doubt that there was an atmosphere for him to contribute. Ilya's brother Alexei is a real piece of work, but you know he was doing a good job because we all hate him so much. He's like the Joffrey Baratheon of gay TV. His actor, Slavik Rogozin, was born in Russia but raised in Canada, so we have another Canadian link. He did a great job with some of the micro expressions in episode 5, and you really feel the surprise on his face when Ilya goes to punch him. It really says a lot when someone plays what is essentially a pretty minor character, but goes all out and delivers a good performance like this. I get the idea that his performance will be overlooked in favor of some of the bigger characters, but he did a really good job, and I do have to shout that out. Cliff Marlowe is another one of the relatively minor roles that I think deserves a lot of credit. When I was watching the episodes, it went under the radar that he's the one who accidentally caused Shane's injury in episode 5, so if that wasn't clear to you before then now you know. He's basically Ilya's only friend in Boston, aside from Connor's, who's an even more minor character, but both of them shine in their roles. Most of what we see from Marlowe is off ice, but I've never doubted for a moment that this guy could be a hockey player. He fits the look so well, and he plays the part well too. Hayden Pike and Jackie by extension are super fun. Colin Potter, who plays Hayden, comes to mind immediately as being from the Disney Channel movie The Swap, where he plays an older brother who is also all about hockey, and I can't help but see some of that reflected in his character here. He's only 27, which feels crazy to say because he's 4 kids in the show, but I suppose that's possible. I will confess I haven't read the Hayden side story that takes place at the end of Heated Rivalry, but I think that the way he's portrayed in the show is great. It's clear he's one of Shane's genuine friends, and he and his wife are also the only people who stock Shane's ginger ale for him aside from Ilya, which is a very telling detail. I'm looking forward to seeing how he plays out on the upcoming season, giving Hayden's contributions to the story moving forward. If you know, you know. The rest of the Montreal Metros, like JJ and so on, are fine. They have so little to do, but I feel like their general presence is the way it should be. If I have one hope for additions in the next season, I hope we get more of a chance to get attached to them. I'm trying to keep the stuff from the long game as spoiler-free as possible, but I think that Montreal's presence will be made even more dramatic moving forward if we really get to bond with as many of them as we can. Shane likes them, so why can't we? On Ilya's side, Svetlana is great. She's kind of like Ilya's version of Hayden in that she's the closest confidant, but she's also much closer to him than Hayden is with Shane. Being childhood friends, she's been there through so much of his development, including some that the audience hasn't even seen, and I think she brightens up every scene she's in. If there are ever going to be more side stories in this series, I'd really love to see what Svetlana gets up to. More of her, please. I especially would love to see how she interacts with Shane and whether or not their shared experiences with Ilya would have any effect on that. Drama, tension, friendship, I want to see it. Sasha is an interesting addition to the show, and I like that we get a bit of an extended look at how his presence affects Ilya. In the book, if I'm not mistaken, he's mentioned, albeit under a different name, but he doesn't really appear in person. I think the whole bathroom scene is great and plants that seed early on that maybe Shane is the only guy that Ilya is interested in for the time being. Caden Connors is great, although I wish we get to see more of him. Like Svetlana, I feel like there's an opportunity to do some kind of side story, even if it's just in writing rather than the show itself. We have very limited episodes and a ton more to get through, so maybe not in the show, but I digress. When even the side characters in your show are actually interesting, we run into some snags when it comes to runtime. Rose is great, and while I was skeptical about her motivations at her first appearance, I ultimately landed on liking her too. Once again, it's kind of a shame that she gets stuck being in a restaurant for like 70% of her screen time, so I wish we would have seen more of her out and about. The moment with her at the hockey game is great, and definitely inspiring a future Halloween costume of mine with the Hollander jersey, and it shows how great she could have been if she wasn't stuck in a dimly lit restaurant most of the time. Her friend Miles is fine, but of course he falls into the same traps as the other minor characters in that there isn't really any time dedicated to him. While we're on the topic of Rose, I also want to point out how I love how little she cares about being overheard when she and Shane are talking towards the end of the 5th episode. Like, she's fully on speakerphone in front of her makeup artist and talking about Shane's huge secret like it's no big deal. I get that they're likely to have NDAs involved with every aspect of that shoot, and she's in the process of getting her arms painted so she can't really hold the phone up to her ear, But it feels like a time and place situation. I don't know, it could have gone wrong so quickly. Scott Hunter is great in the show too. As a fan of Francois Arnault, I knew as soon as I saw he was on the cast that this would go well, and he delivered. They did a really great job of teasing his appearance in the first few episodes before jumping in and giving him his own full episode, and when I was watching with some friends who hadn't read the books, they thought that shot at the beginning of the third episode when it repeats the scene at the Olympic Cafe but zooms in on Scott instead was really solid. If I had one complaint about his dedicated episode, it's that I kind of think it should have been swapped with the Rose episode. I get that the timeline was shifted a little and that's when it happens in the book, but I feel like the cliffhanger tension from the Rose episode would have been heightened if we moved on to a Scott episode in the meantime, and then the beginning of end of Scott's book could have been back-to-back episodes. It's super minor and I'm sure Jacob Tierney considered it. So say what you want about Scott, but he showed up at that smoothie shop for the second time and was basically ready to move Kip in completely. And I kinda love the dedication. I mentioned this before, but they tweaked the timeline for the story to make it longer than just a few months, and that also really worked. Part of what makes Shane and Ilya's story so frustrating at first is how long it takes before either of them confront any actual feelings. We love a slow burn. So to have some of that mirrored with Scott and Kip as well, who go through what is basically a 3-year slow burn as well, it's really great. I think it helps to emphasize how big of a deal Scott's kiss with Kip is for Shane and Ilya, since their relationships have a slight connection in that way. Like I said before, Scott and Kip change the game so Ilya and Shane can play. Kip's whole thing is his financial insecurity and his dreams for grad school, and I feel like both of those things were made clear in the show. The moment when Kip comes down from the stands is great, and I really like how he reiterates to Scott that he doesn't have to do what he's about to do, and despite the 3 or so year wait, he's still willing to accommodate Scott. 10 out of 10 portrayal of their story. Kip's friends like Elena and Maria and Kyle and his dad are all great too. I especially liked his dad, who I hoped would get his time to shine, and he definitely did. Compared to Ilya's dad, who's kind of the worst to him, and Shane's parents, who are oblivious and unintentionally controlling, Kip's dad is exactly what you want to see in a supportive parent. I really like how all 4 of the main men have different parental situations, and a lot of each of their actions is reflected partly in those relationships. You get a sense with Scott and Ilya and Shane that they're determined to live up to their parents' legacies and to be the perfect sons, so to speak, but with Kip we see a different side. He's afraid of disappointing his dad, yeah, but it's not out of an obligation to live up to his dad's expectations, rather than understanding he's letting his own desires and expectations down and doesn't want to present an unhappy version of himself to his dad. The way his dad looks when Kip goes down to kiss Scott is great. Kip's worries are unfounded, and we, the audience, know that their father-son relationship will survive whatever discussions they have after, even if we don't ultimately see them. The rest of the New York Admirals, like Carter Vaughn, are fine too. We see even less of them than we do with the Boston Raiders, the Montreal Metros, and Vaughn is really the only one we know anything about. It's kind of hard to tell if he's really supportive of the whole gay thing at first, but shout out to him for voicing his opinion at all at the Olympics. While we're on topic, I feel like I have to bring up Shane's figure skating friend too. You're telling me that this man, the one played by Dylan Moskovich, who is 41, is supposed to have trained with Shane? I'm all for the cameo, but I feel like they could have come up with some other explanation. Also worth noting, it's probably unlikely that he's playing himself here, but the real-life Dylan Moskovich did compete in the 2014 Olympics and won silver, and then later went on to partner up with a Russian skater. So there's some fun similarities between Shane and Ilya there. He's also not gay, despite whatever Carter Vaughn might think, but maybe the character is. Anywho, the characters are the strongest part of the show, and I hope that I'm making that point clear. In my past videos, I've been a fan of using character development as a benchmark for evaluating character quality, and if I'm doing that again, then this show hits it out of the park. Yeah, static characters can be good, but when it comes to my main characters, I need things to change. This show delivers completely. As well as season-long development, we get episode-long developments. It probably helps that pretty much every episode is over multiple years, so the changes are a lot more noticeable, but holy wow, they are really different at the beginning of the first episode compared to the end of the 6th. I also want to take a moment to bring up the cultural impact that I think this show has had and will have in the future. I already said it's probably the best show of 2025, and I will stand by that. A lot of the time, queer stories are focused on trauma. The trauma of being ostracized, the trauma of rejection, the trauma of losing a family, the trauma of impossible relationships, the trauma of death and illness, and so on. I bet if you think of almost any show that focuses on queer people, you can probably think of something deeply traumatic that haunts the storyline, especially at the end. Heated Rivalry isn't immune to all of this, since it does have to have drama, but it doesn't end in a place where the couple is dead or permanently broken or deeply unhappy. And I think that's really refreshing. As a queer person myself, it's nice to see more diversity in the kinds of stories that are being told. It's not all trauma. I think that's the big takeaway here. This is a different kind of queer story than we're used to. While there's a handful of queer sports romance novels, I can't recall any that have been developed into movies or TV series, so this is entirely unique in its category. Hell, the NHL, arguably one of the most deeply rooted homophobic sports leagues in the terms of fans, the bureaucracy, and possibly the players, has tried embracing heated rivalry. Granted, it's probably entirely for marketing and PR purposes, but the Montreal Canadiens literally playing the trailer at a game, or the official NHL pages sharing comments about the show, it's not just different, it's unheard of. You can have opinions about whether a toxic sports community like the one you tend to see with hockey deserves this kind of redemption, but I think regardless of where you stand, you can acknowledge that this is a step in the right direction. I hope this isn't one step forward, two steps back kind of thing. When queer shows make it big, you often hear people talking about how little queer kids are going to grow up and finally see representation that lets them feel comfortable with their own identities. Now, this show is absolutely not meant for kids, queer or not, so I don't think that this show is aiming to do that. But I do think that it offers a look at successful queer people in a realm that we don't see them very often, and that has a chance to be majorly impactful for a lot of people. And if even one minorly homophobic hockey fan tunes into the show and realizes that queer people are human too, then I think that's progress. There's definitely a reason that so many of the cast read the scripts and realize that what they were signing on to do was more than just softcore porn. It has real heart, it has the potential to help a lot of people, whether they knew it or not. If it wasn't completely clear, there is very, very little about this show that I think doesn't work. I watch a lot of TV, and there really aren't all that many shows I think need so few changes. Jacob Tierney, Rachel Reed, and the rest of the production team really worked their asses off and delivered a final product that is exceptional. The number of times I've watched these episodes is kind of insane. The Vegas bathroom scene and the way Shane says genetic plays on my head in a loop, and all the things she said has certainly jumped up on my most streamed songs of the year. Seriously, if Spotify Wrapped had waited a few weeks, it would have been in my top 5. I've seen awards eligibility floating around the discussion regarding this show, and from what I understand, the show is ineligible for the Emmys. Something about how there needs to be some kind of US involvement in the production as it's being made, and like I mentioned before, Heated Rivalry was 100% Canadian up until distribution in the US, so there might be some issues there. If I'm completely misinformed, please let me know, because I'd love nothing more than the cast and crew of this series to receive all the awards and recognition for their work. I'm pretty sure it is eligible for the Canadian Screen Awards, which is kind of the Canadian equivalent to the Emmy, but I don't think Connor's story is eligible since he's not Canadian, and that would be a real shame. As the awards season progresses, I'll be eager to see how and if these technicalities are handled and whether or not they'll be making any exceptions or changes. The show really is revolutionary, and it would be a shame for it to be completely overlooked due to something as silly as a technicality. Like I said in the title, I genuinely think this is the best show of 2025, and as far as my interests are concerned, it's not really that close either. I'm also really looking forward to see how Hudson Williams and Connor Story's careers will play forward from here. They've both jumped up past 1 million followers each on Instagram, and they're receiving a ton of justified positive attention from all sorts of people, so I'd be surprised if they don't end up in some really solid projects moving forward. I believe Connor has his own indie movie in production right now, so I'm excited for that, and I guarantee Hudson will be appearing in something in the coming months. It's always nice to see some relatively unknown talent get spotlight, and I hope that more shows take that lesson to heart. You don't need to cast the biggest name out there to get an incredible performance that people are invested in. At this point, all I can really do, aside from beg one last time for a chance to audition for Harris, is to beg and plead with Crave for a physical box set release. It's not impossible, since some other shows that have its biggest audience on Crave, like Letterkenny, have physical releases, but if the demand for the books is proof enough, then they should know that the demand for the box set is serious. Pop the episodes onto one disc, maybe some behind-the-scenes footage, bloopers, cast commentary, whatever you want, onto another, and bam, instant bestseller. I've already gone and bought stuff off the official Heated Rivalry merch page, so you know damn well I'll be doing that again. I'd buy copies for everyone in my life too, since I've already forced half of them to watch it. And I'm happy to report that my best friends and my mom have all been successfully converted into full-time Holland fanatics. Since we're nearing the end of the video, I figured I'd take a second to talk about some of the controversies surrounding the show, mainly about whether or not the actors need to be out as gay in order to properly portray these characters and be the face of such a prominent queer series. Just in case it comes up in any comments. In my opinion, and I know I'm not the be-all end-all opinion here, no, it's not necessary. I think the most important aspect when telling queer stories is to have queer people at the helm for creative decisions, and this show does have that. It's not made with blinders on, completely ignoring the reality of the world around it. Jacob Tierney and the rest of this team have taken a lot of care when crafting this show for the screen, and it does show. Whether or not the actors are or are not queer themselves, or whether they're out or not, does not matter in the slightest to me, as long as they're portraying these characters as intended by the people behind the screen. That's my opinion. Would it be nice for more out queer actors to get opportunities in television? Absolutely. But if we look back at the cast list of this show, it's not like there aren't any. There are out queer actors involved in this production, and I'm not the kind to go around policing queer identity or putting up barriers that stop people who are possibly queer from being involved in a series like this just because they aren't out. There's a time and place to campaign for more queer visibility on TV, and I don't think going after one of the only shows that actually has some is the place to start. Tangentially related, but it's also not our responsibility as the audience to police the personal lives of anyone involved in this project. As much as I love the show and parasocial I feel I've become with the actors based on interviews and behind the scenes footage, I don't know any of these people and I am not entitled to know anything about them. Leave them be and enjoy the show for what it is. A damn good adaptation and an even better Canadian TV series. If they want to talk about it, then they will, but it's really not any of our business. I'd say this is everything I have to say on the topic and that I won't be making another Heated Rivalry video, but I'm sure that there'll be something that comes up as soon as I post this. You can guarantee I'll make another one of these for the second season, and I'll be sure to keep everyone posted if I end up stumbling my way into playing Harris like I won't shut up about. Maybe I'll find myself attending an actual hockey game and cheering on the Ottawa Senators, which is a sentiment I never thought I'd have. If you're still itching for more Heated Rivalry content, let me drop a few content creators that have been making some really awesome stuff. Both Connor and Hudson have made appearances on podcasts discussing some of the behind the scenes and their experiences on the show and getting casted, so I'd recommend the In Your Dreams with Owen Thiel or the Shut Up Evan podcast with Connor Story, or the Permanent Rain Press interview with Hudson Williams. It's also not really an interview, but Hudson did a 20-minute breakdown of his skincare routine with The Cut, which is a lot of fun. On TikTok, I also recommend checking out Valentina V, who breaks down a lot of the cinematography and things you might have missed or might find interesting about the production. And of course, there's also about 1 trillion incredible edits to different songs. Personally, the 1-2 Maneater made by MVT has gone triple platinum in my head. And as far as merch goes, I am the proud owner of a Shane Hollander Montreal Metros jersey, as well as a bunch of the pins and things from the official merch site, which I love, love, love. I will be swapping out the jersey for an Ottawa one when they come around because, I have to represent my city. And definitely not for any other reason. I would have bought one of the stupid Canadian Wolfbird hats, but baseball hats never look right on me, so I'll stick to the jersey. Whew! I really didn't mean for this video to turn into nothing but glazing this show, and I really don't have anything else negative to say. So honestly, the only bad thing about this show is that it's only 6 episodes. I would have been more than happy with 10 or 12 or 24 of this. When season 2 comes out, I will be sad. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you liked the video, and leave me a comment down below about any other shows or books you think I should check out, or if you have any other Heated Rivalry recommendations for me to look at. It is a joy talking about this stuff with you guys, so I can't wait to see what you've got for me. Until next time.